How's it going, everyone, and welcome to another episode of No Excuses on VGWProductions.com and YouTube.com with your favorite show hosts, Aristil,
Venerian,
and Volacel, and we're here to bring you the latest news and commentary on the video games industry for the week. But first of all, if you'd like to get involved with the show, you can do so by sending us email at noexcusesvtw@gmail.com, or you can follow us on the Twitter at noexcusesvtw, or you can join us in our Discord server and talk to the hosts and other listeners to the show. And you can get there by clicking on the link provided in the description underneath the archive on YouTube.
do it now.
Happy Murica Day, everybody.
It is Murica Day.
It is Murica Day.
Murica.
So if you hear explosions outside, they're still going, although they're pretty distant right now. So you may not be able to hear them, but that's what it is. It's Murica. Yeah, there's Murica going on outside.
So much Murica. There's also a lot of Murica going on in PSO too. Good grief, have they gone overboard in the Murica on that event?
Not nearly enough overboard. Needs more Murica.
It's pretty plentiful Murica as it is.
It really, you can see the general sort of sensibility that the Japanese have about America, and it's the same sort of sensibility that you see in, say, Edison and FGO.
Just excess.
Well, they think every American is Teddy Roosevelt.
You mean they're not?
I mean,
not everyone has such a fine moustache.
We all aspire to be Teddy Roosevelt, but we're not all quite there yet.
Ah, dear. So, on the stream today, I'm going to do a thing that is probably a really bad idea.
Oh?
Because you do all of those things on stream that are good ideas.
Exactly. I'm going to play some realism. The Doom 2 mod. Yeah, I installed it earlier this week and set it up, played a few rounds. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to play maybe 2 or 3 rounds just to get a feel for it. 2 hours passed. This mod is absolutely insane. What it does, it's just plumps you down into Arena for Doom 2, and then it spins 3 reels, which will give you 3 different modifiers for what happens in the round, which is usually some variety of weapon modifier, some miscellaneous modifier, and then it will determine what enemies pop up. So I've had one where I've been running around and dropping giant spiky ball things on neckbeards. Or another one where I've just been, I've had another one where I was an immortal dog fighting Nazis.
Isn't that like the entirety of Rise of the Triad?
Pretty much, yeah. That's the best bits of Rise of the Triad.
No, if you use the codes, it can be all of Rise of the Triad.
And those are totally the codes you should use. It is dog mode and is the best thing I've ever seen. So yeah, the map doesn't seem to change actually between rounds. I think you've got to come back out to the main menu and go back in. So this is going to be a really bad idea because at the best of times when I'm doing the show, I'm trying to multitask between 3 different things, being playing the game, running the show, keeping an eye on the stream. I'm not expecting anything good to happen here, and it should at least be entertaining, maybe. At the very least, the randomness of the whole thing is going to be fun. So let's see. Going to start. Okay, I get to pick a map. Let's go with JRPGville. That sounds terrible. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I'm in a fantasy village fighting guys with jetpacks. Alright. So, this is part of my week. I also got to remember exactly how Doom 2 works, because I'm not very good at that either. For the rest of my week, not a huge amount that's happened. I ended up actually sitting down and submitting the final assessments for my dog course, so that's all done. Well, almost. I've got to wait for the marking, and you know how things go with animals and scholars.
No.
They just tend to do things in their own time. So, yeah, that's a good thing I can actually finally tick off as done. It's been sitting kind of on the back burner for the last couple of years.
And what will you get?
I will get a certification in dog training and care. So I could potentially start up a dog training class or something. I don't know.
But that wasn't the reason you did it, so that you could start a dog training class.
I don't particularly want to do dog training class. Like, long term, I'd hopefully do something with assistance dogs, but whoopsie. That was a rocket launcher in the face. Don't use a rocket launcher at point blank range, kids.
Bad for you.
It is bad for you. It is bad juju. What on earth am I fighting? Bad guys in bad Doom Guy cosplay. Who are completely incapable of fighting back. Except for those guys over there who are capable of fighting back, as it turns out. So that's that. I did dip my toes into Civ 5 again for a little bit. What I didn't know is Civ 5 apparently now has a Battle Royale mode.
What doesn't?
Everything does it. So I haven't actually tried it yet, but it's apparently you are kind of dumped onto a map as one of a variety of factions. And not, you know, the usual factions. It's things like you can be zombies, or you can be aliens, or cowboys, or pirates, whatever. Oh, there's a giant eyeball there. And apparently it's, yeah, you try not to get killed. And that's it. It's Battle Royale, but on the Civilization engine. And I have no idea why it exists.
I see.
So I'm just going to keep going with this and hope I don't embarrass myself too much. At least Doom does kind of sort of auto-aim up and down for you, but up and down aiming on Doom has never been a thing, really. Okay, now I'm holding an Uzi wrong. Right, fine.
What?
Yeah. I'm not sure what that is, actually. It's an Uzi, or is it a giant machine gun? I don't know. Anyway, the way Real Sim works is you do 5... Oh, jeez, now I'm flying it. Oh! I have realized I have made a terrible mistake. I have no control over my my vertical movement when I'm flying. That's a problem.
So you're going to fall into the sky now.
And I'm dead. So, okay. It means I can just fly over everything on the ground and not actually achieve anything. So that was a round of Real Sim. If you go through 5 of those regular rounds, you end up with a boss round, and then that calls the end of the game for a standard game. I haven't actually seen what the boss is yet. I have heard mention of a wizard in a monster truck, but it could be anything.
Everything you're saying is just like
nonsense.
My mind can't process it. I don't have anything. I got nothing to say.
It is just glorious, glorious nonsense, and I love it. There's a lot of Doom 2 mods out there, and I know Sarah says now that I've actually got Doom on the stream, he's probably going to pop out of the woodworks and tell us about his favourite ones, as he usually does.
Or denounce your gameplay.
Oh, he's definitely going to do that, and he's right to do that, because I'm awful at it. But I can blame multitasking, and I'm going to stick with that excuse. What else did I really do this week? Just a bit more PSO2, and yeah, that event is peak America. The urgent quest that pops up is ridiculous.
America.
It drops you into what is allegedly a street section of Las Vegas, allegedly.
Is that what it's supposed to be?
It's supposed to be Las Vegas, but it looks it's more like a section out of Kamurocho. So yeah, if you see Goro Majima pop out of the woodwork, I would not be a scrap surprised. And you end up fighting, one round you'll be fighting robots, and then next moment here come, for some reason, industrial construction equipment, and you're fighting that. Then you get these really irritating Gemini Darkspawn boss, whatever it was called. And that fight just takes much, much longer than it needs to. So yeah, as you're running around, because the map is so big, they've got these boost pads around the place, so you Naruto run around the map and hit jump pads to get up on top of buildings in order to get to the fight quicker. So that's all good fun. It's hard to describe, really. You've just got to do this thing.
It's very silly.
It is incredibly silly. It is nice, though, that all the loot is dropped at the end.
Yeah, there's none of this standing around while everybody runs off because you're trying to find enough space in your inventory to pick stuff up.
Yeah. Just try not to do too well, because sometimes you will get too much loot, and it's all Vita weapons, which are worthless.
I bet we're going to get to a point, though, where it'd be like, oh, man, I wish we had some Vita weapons. I need fodder.
Yeah, that'd be when you need them, is just as fodder. I did find out, actually, there are no more harmonizers. There's 3 harmonizers I can get in the game, as opposed to everyone else being able to pick up weapons all over the place. But
so do you just see, like, a spray of eggs or something?
Largely, yeah. That's what I get instead, is eggs and candy.
That seems kind of unseemly somehow.
Yes. But there are harmonizers in the game, as it turns out, and they're all on the ultimate level quests, which is fun. As it is, the basic harmonizer you get just gives you a kind of a healing boost, so all your healing spells are a lot more effective. There's one that gives you a PP bonus, or regeneration bonus, provided you haven't been hit in a while. You end up creating an aura around yourself, and anyone standing in that gets a bonus to regeneration. There's another one that does the same thing for defense, and there's a third, which I'm not entirely sure what it does. It's not particularly clear. So, yeah. I had a look in the market for them, and they're going for something like 8 million at the least for an unenhanced one.
They must be pretty rare drops or something.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. I might flick over to PSO2 for the second half of the show, depending on how this goes. So I'm going to leave my week as short, sweet, and complete nonsense because I've got to figure out what on earth I'm doing in this game.
Okay.
So, Volza, what have you been up to?
I suppose much the same in terms of PSO. I've continued to just try and play a little bit each night, and the more I find out about this game, I continue to find out more things about this game that continue to confuse me even more. Like the whole items thing just gets far more complicated as time goes on, and we don't even have half the features in our version of the game yet. Like we aren't at the point where we're socketing rings into armor and crap. Like that's this whole thing is starting to get a little bit out of hand. But yeah, it's a very good just sort of run around and shoot some stuff, wind down game at the end of the day. Probably the bulk of my time this week, though, has probably been eaten by FGO because I've been sort of slowly progressing through the story of Gotterdammerung, the second Lost Belt. I'm not really sure how I feel about it as a story. It's not as good as the ones that I think of as really good. I'm not sure whether I think of it as being better or worse than the Russia Lost Belt was. I can't really tell. I feel like this one has obsessed a little bit too much about the antagonist's personal dysfunctions. It almost feels like it's more her story than it is the story of the cast. Okay. Which I can sort of see that. I can sort of see why you would do it that way. It does make a certain amount of sense because we've had a lot of Mash and Co. in the first arc, and that's sort of like where most of her character development happens. The first arc and the first Lost Belt really are very focused on Mash, but this one seems to be very focused on Ophelia, and it's all a very bit of a curious setting, in that all of the humans in this Lost Belt seem to be more or less quite happy, but that's because they don't know any better, more or less. They've been held in a sort of stasis where there's like 100 villages containing 100 humans each, and the every time you reach the age of 25, you will leave the village on the appointed day and go out and get squished by giants.
What?
That's just how their culture works. They go out to die at 25, so everybody who lives in the villages as basically young adults and children, and everybody else dies.
Right.
And the population is maintained that way. But
seems incredibly impactful.
also, if you reach the age of 15 without having any children, you also have to go out to die.
Hold on, what?
But,
that sounds okay.
But they literally don't know anything else, and they're all perfectly happy with this arrangement.
Huh.
Because they've simply, they're sort of like they're viewed, they're sort of described as human beings that have been reduced to the level of cattle, because they just don't know that there's anything more that they could aspire to. Like, when attempting to communicate basic cultural concepts of like freedom, MASH completely hits a brick wall, because they think freedom is like the ability to go down to the village lake anytime they want. And they can't imagine anything more than that. And so this has all been maintained by the god, the king of the Lost Belt, in this case, the one surviving Norse goddess, Skadi. And she views this as an expression of her love for all humankind. Because, well, she's a god, and it's made abundantly clear in Nasuverse settings that the gods don't share the same common sense as humanity in most cases. They just don't understand. And when they try and adopt a human concept or impose their idea of a human concept on humanity, it's always horrific. But they won't realize it because they just don't understand.
There's got no point of reference, really, I suppose.
Yeah, because they exist on a different sort of level. But yeah, so that's the setting of this Lost Belt, and we're currently at the point where things are spiraling wildly out of control. But everything is pretty much guaranteed to spiral wildly out of control anytime Napoleon is involved.
The man is a walking ham factory.
Yes, he very much is a walking ham factory. He's the first servant that you run into, and he's basically, but the general gist in the Lost Belts is there's typically a given Lost Belt will have at least one servant, usually more than that eventually, from normal human history rather than the Lost Belts history, because the Lost Belts are all alternate histories where something has changed. Like the Lost Belt 1's story was, there was basically a second ice age rolled in around the time of Ivan the Terrible, and it was so intense that he had all of Russia's people fused with demonic wolves in order to give them the hardiness required to survive the conditions. So that was where it parted from our history. In this case, it's not exactly clear yet, as far as I've got through the story, where exactly the split happened, but basically it seems like Ragnarok was fought to a stalemate with everyone except Skadi dead or imprisoned. And basically that gave Skadi free reign as the only survivor, to remake the world in her particular tastes. So all of this is set in about 1000 BC or whatever. But the general gist is that in a given Lost Belt, servants will be summoned by the planet from conventional human history in the hopes of trying to mitigate the situation in some way. And in this case, for whatever reason, they chose First Emperor of France, Napoleon Bonaparte, but it's not the real Napoleon in the way a lot of servants get summoned different to the actual historical selves because of the way people remember them. Like there's always this tension in servant featuring stories in Type Moon, where every servant always ends up being somewhere on the spectrum between who they are remembered as and who they actually were.
Yep.
So you end up sometimes with like Berserker Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, and sometimes you end up with like the mad crusading warrior Dracula without any actual parts of the legends about vampires or anything attached to him. In this case, the Napoleon is mostly the Napoleon who has lots of strange legends told about him. You know how they tell lots of legends about Washington, for instance. It's sort of like that. There's a similar, if you don't realize, there's a similar sort of body of lore surrounding Napoleon, of legendary feats that he supposedly did. And this is that Napoleon, and he actually comments that he's way taller in the summoning than he expected he would be summoned if he would expect to have if he was summoned as a rider. So it's implied that if you summon Rider Napoleon, you get historical Napoleon, and if you summon Archer Napoleon, you get legendary Napoleon. So he carries around this enormous stonking great cannon, which is his primary weapon, which he both shoots people with and clobbers people with because it's absolutely enormous. At one point, and to get an idea of his character, at one point you're trying to infiltrate Skadi's castle, and you're coming in the back way, and then you have to fight some monsters, and then at the end of the battle is like, oh, our presence has been detected. There are more monsters coming, and Napoleon's like, oh man, I thought we were being really quiet. I was really careful with my cannon. Oh. He's not 100%. He's not 100% tethered to the common sense of humanity either. And upon meeting the enemy Crypta Ophelia, his first move is to propose to her.
Of course.
He claims to have fallen in love with her at first sight and proposes marriage immediately. And he later claims, and it's left entirely ambiguous whether or not he's telling the truth, that every summoning he is obliged to proclaim his undying love for at least one woman that he meets.
That sounds like a completely made-up thing.
Yeah, especially because he's like a few chapters back, he's just gotten done telling you all about how deeply in love with Ophelia he is, and then you end up rescuing Brynhild from a castle where she's been imprisoned, and the first thing he does is hit on her, laying it on really thick, and then everybody else present is like, what happened to you being loyal only to Ophelia? And he makes a whole list of excuses about why this doesn't count. But, yeah, he's quite the character, and he's sort of like on the same approximate level of ham as Iskander, and has basically declared you to be his new grand army with which you're going to conquer the Lost Belt.
Right.
So yeah, he's been a real bright point in the story, because he adds a lot of levity that wouldn't otherwise be there, because the situation is, despite the fact that in all of the villages where humans live, it's all, rainbows and butterflies, the situation is quite genuinely horrific. It's just that it's all happening slightly off screen. But yeah, I've enjoyed the story so far, but the battles that are coming up look monstrously difficult, and so my progress has been relatively slow because some of the fights are quite hard. You've got to spend some time thinking about what the best way is to deal with them. There's lots of additional curveballs that are thrown in. Thankfully, a lot of those curveballs are on your side this time. It's not just them constantly giving the enemies nasty tricks to play on you. They give you additional supporting things as well. Like there's a fight where if you take the support Napoleon and put him in the back line, he'll just deal 10,000 damage to the opponent every turn. And if you put him in the front line, he will he'll buff your team and remove certain buffs from the opponent. So you've got additional strategic choices that you can make that give bonuses to your side, which is an unfamiliar feeling, since normally what happens is the enemy gets all the cool stuff and you just have to desperately survive. But yeah, it's been quite entertaining. I don't feel like they've really reached the real heights of the storytelling from Arc 1, but it's certainly more solid than a lot of the chapters in Arc 1. I mean, Arc 1 had a lot of bad stuff in it, but yeah, I really liked a lot of the stories in Arc 1 and 1.5, particularly, Camelot, Babylonia, Salem, even Shinjuku was quite good. I quite liked Shinjuku. Not Septim. Nobody likes Septim. Everybody. If people even remember that Septim happened, which is very common for people not to remember anything about it because it was so banal.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't remember any specifics about the story. There was Roman people and Baby Iskandar was there, and
Was he?
Yeah, briefly with Waver.
Yeah, he made a quick appearance. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then there was Nero and more Nero, and then Altera showed up at the end, and then we moved on.
Yeah, all I remember is that Altera's the boss at the end. That's the only thing that I can remember.
That's it.
Yeah, because it was such a bad chapter. But yeah, that's part of the reason why Romulus figures so prominently in the second part of the Greek Lost Belt, is because they felt like they did him dirty in Septim.
They kind of did.
Like Romulus is such a larger than life figure, mythologically and historically, that to have him just be this sort of random throwaway 3-star didn't make much sense. So instead, he's like, in the second Greek Lost Belt, he's like this 5-star god-slaying monster compared to his previous form. Still very fond of Rome, though.
Very fond of Rome.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time on that. I did continue just grinding away at the Azulane event, but I've sort of long finished the important part. I got the USS Independence light carrier because everybody's doing America things right now.
So much manga.
And I still haven't. I've managed to get both of the super rare aircraft carriers, USS Essex and USS Shangri-La, out of the gacha on that one, but I haven't been able to get a hold of some of the submarines that I want, because I really want another super rare level submarine, because with submarines in Azure Lane, there's a pretty, unlike most boats, there's a pretty strong correlation between rarity and power. And furthermore, the German submarines are pretty much categorically the best. They're both more powerful than most other subs and tend to have very strong synergies with each other. So I've only got two super rare German submarines. I've got a third one that's only elite rarity, but so I can form a submarine squad out of that, because I was sort of regretting. I've left my subs by the wayside for a long time because they're not crucial for most stages, and raising them is a pain because it costs a lot of oil to summon them each fight, and they don't get much EXP, and they don't get any EXP unless you happen to actively use them in a fight. So I ended up letting them sort of fall by the wayside, and I'm kind of regretting that now, because that's the reason that I haven't been able to get a perfect clear on the EX difficulty stage for this event, is because it's sort of, you're required more or less to have level 100 plus submarines, and my highest level one's like 87 or something. But yeah, I've been pretty fortunate in the gacha in that game though so far, so it's a bit churlish of me to complain about not getting one particular thing that I want. And Essex was the important thing to get, since she's the most powerful USS carrier, and the USS carriers are almost categorically the most powerful in most situations, except PvP, where the IJN ones are often better, depending on your setup. Basically because Hiryu is basically indestructible, and Akagi and Kaga work so well together, and they'll usually get to launch their airstrike one more time than most carriers will. So they tend to dominate the meta in that particular sense. Although the meta is very slanted heavily in favour of battleships right now. But, yeah. What else did I do? I'm not sure that I did much else. I'm sort of in the doldrums at the moment with anime because the new season hasn't started. Like, I think there's been, a new episode of Fire Force that I haven't watched yet. But I think that's the only thing that started rolling so far that I can think of offhand. Okay. And honestly, it doesn't look like a very promising season, to put it bluntly. In PSO2, I started doing a little bit more of the story, which, for those who have done the story, will be aware that it's basically watching a lot of very disjointed cutscenes. and it's very hard to make sense of what's going on. I can only assume that it's very hard to make sense of what's going on because the anime is actually a huge boon in that sense, because it takes the most important of those little snippets and then smooshes them together into a narrative. I'll call it a narrative.
It is because a narrative.
It's a narrative because it's not great, but it's more of a narrative than what the game presents you with, because what the game presents you with is a lot of confusion for the most part.
Yeah.
But it also shone a light on why I felt the first part of the story was so weak in the anime. And it's because they're basically at that stage, they're laying groundwork and trying to pick and choose the things that are important.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of superfluous junk that happens in the storyline. I've only played a little bit of it still. Like, I just had only played the first stage before. It does scale everything exactly to your level, which explains why I got shellacked. Because Ari did it when he was comparatively low level. And, you know, when you're comparatively low level, everybody's stats are roughly the same, give or take. You haven't specialized so much. I did it when I was high level, meaning that my fragility as a braver has really come to the fore. You know, because a hunter that takes a hit, it does at level 1, it'll do roughly the same amount of damage to them as it does to any other class, even though they're a tank type class. Yeah. So when you hit level 65, like I am, you start to really see some major differences, because all of my points have been put into pew-pewing things instead of surviving. So yeah, I can still be like 2 to 3 shot by any enemy that I fight in the storyline. I just have to be careful not to get hit by them. But yeah, the storyline in the anime is very disjointed early on because it is pulling together bits and pieces that have been scattered around by the game's storyline. But if you really want to know, you know, the gist of what's actually going on, Fern's suggestion to just watch the anime instead is very much a good way to go. I don't know how many episodes of Japan's PSO2 story content the anime actually covers, but it is definitely a better way of experiencing the story, because it will, you know, it'll make some sense, and additionally the characters look a lot less ugly. I feel like
really off in the game.
Yeah, I feel like they dropped the ball somehow, because there are plenty of nice looking NPCs, but the ones that ended up in the storyline all seem to be a bit weird.
Yeah.
Like Matoi in the anime is really cute compared to Matoi in the game, which looks really strange.
The thing from Uncanny Valley, you mean?
Yeah. And anytime a character in the game uses makeup, they always use catastrophically too much.
I mean,
whereas practically nobody wears makeup in anime.
Yeah. Oh.
But yeah. So I'll grind through the story because Ari says it's a good way to get star gems. So I'll get there in the end. Yep. But yeah. Also, the new scratch card campaign.
And there are so many Megamines running around and Aquas.
Oh jeez, I took an Aqua on a quest the other day, and yeah, she was about as useless as you'd expect.
Why would you do that? Why would you take Aqua on a quest?
I wanted to see if this person.
You know full well what happens
correctly.
if you take. Full well what happens if you take Aqua on a quest.
Lots of screaming.
Nothing
usually.
good.
Nothing good. Well, I got the quest down, but yeah, that AI Aqua did absolutely nothing. I think she cast her holy spell a couple of times, and that was about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be in character for Aqua to do nothing but cast anti over and over again.
Yeah. Purification.
But yeah, so that's the thing that I found quite entertaining, that if you're willing to go into the PSO2 gacha, you can address as main characters plus Union.
Union.
Well, Union's basically the Zoidberg of the cast.
She is. Even in Isekai Quartet, she's still Zoidberged. Like, she's class C. Just
the
Yunyun.
only one. Yeah. And it really does feel like bullying. Like,
she hasn't
even
done
in
anything
the
to deserve it.
even in the books, she's like one of the almost no members of the cast who are genuinely nice, good-natured people who've just had a bit of hard luck. Like she's just a really good person compared to everyone else, and everyone else just bags on her relentlessly.
She gets the Zoidberg treatment.
Because Zoidberg is a spaz, so even that's not really a fair comparison.
Yeah,
but
Zoidberg brings it on himself half the time.
Yeah, Yunyun would be a Purity Sue in any other story. Except it's Konosuba. And she just stands out in stark contrast to everyone else. Because she gets ragged on more than any member of the cast except possibly Kazuma.
Kazuma definitely brings it on himself.
Yeah. But, so that's the thing. Speaking of light novels, I mentioned that I bought volumes 2 through 8, I believe, of that time I was reincarnated as a slime. So the first 2 arrived, volumes 5 and 6. So, yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot,
Isn't that
Postal
always
System.
the way these things work?
So frustrated. Anyway, I'm looking forward to reading those, when number 2 gets here. Because there's a lot of interesting little side stories that are attached to the books that are not in the anime, and likewise the anime side stories I don't think are in the books because they're designed purely for visual purposes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't think I have much else to talk about. I think that's it.
Okay.
All right. We're not quite at an hour, so I'll go through my week for what it is.
Yeah.
So I ran into a problem ordering my 1070. I had gone full retard, and my Oculus Rift S got here okay, and it worked fine. But my graphics